They sailed from the four corners of the world to trade, to profit, and to build a new metropolis. New York was a home to America's merchant captains because it was the gateway to the sea.
The very earliest instruments of globalization were these sailing ships, and it's a critical story about the formation of New York and the United States.
The world's greatest captains were drawn to the city, but so were the worst. They were the terror of the seven seas.
New York in the 1690s was a pirate port. It was a place that attracted pirates.
So Captain Kidd actually lived in Manhattan.
Yeah, Captain Kidd lived on Pearl Street.
There are old waterfront taverns in Manhattan where river pirates drank and plotted their crimes. Some of them may still be lingering there.
Wicked things have happened at this bar. Several times I'd be sitting at my desk upstairs late at night, and you get this idea that you're not alone. You get this idea that there's a presence around you.
Given the occurrences, does that mean that there's something here that may have been an anomaly? Absolutely.
I see things, I hear things, I still see the stabbing death, and he hasn't moved on.
Good or evil, living or dead, they all sailed into this harbor. Come aboard with me as we follow the secrets of New York.
You stand today on the corner of South Street and Fulton Street. You're really standing in a time warp. That was the World Trade Center of the early 19th century.
It's called Schermerhorn Row, named for the merchant who built these red brick counting houses as the first real office block in Manhattan. It was 1812, and trade in Manhattan was taking off.
It's where the goods of the world came to be traded and where the goods of the United States left to go overseas. It was a swirling hub of urban activity like you could see nowhere else.
South Street Seaport is important because it's the last place that people can go and visualize what the city must have been like 200 years ago. Row after row after row of sailing ships and docking on the East River waterfront. The South Street Seaport is the last place we have where we can even begin to imagine what that was like.
In the 1960s, much of Lower Manhattan was being demolished and replaced by office towers. The Seaport was next, and Norma and Peter Stanford led a volunteer group to save the old buildings on Schermerhorn Row.
What we did was we got so many other people interested that it became unthinkable to destroy these buildings.
Today, you can wander the South Street Seaport Museum and see the iron and wood machinery that built New York's trade. And docked right outside, just as they were in the 1800s, are the museum's collection of sailing ships.
What our sailing vessels offer is the chance for people to be a part of a living example of history. It's exactly the same as the way it was done 100 and more years ago.
Jonathan Boulware was a tall ship captain before he became waterfront director for the South Street Seaport Museum. He understands what it means to sail a 3,100-ton ship powered only by the wind.
We're standing on the quarterdeck of the 1911 German-built bark Peking. She sailed very, very fast around Cape Horn, which is some of the most treacherous waters in the world.
So in order to man these sails, you'd have to climb to the very top, wouldn't you?
Absolutely, in all kinds of weather. And picture this with the ship rolling 40 degrees to one side and then 40 degrees to the other. In a Cape Horn storm.
This is actual footage of the Peking rounding Cape Horn in 1929. Temperatures below zero with hurricane-force winds.
Going aloft in those conditions is definitely taking your life in your hands. A real false move, you could be thrown from where you are aloft. If you're lucky, fall maimed to the deck. If you're unlucky, go into the sea, in which case you'd never be recovered. Remember, 3 points of contact.
Okay. How far is this, Jonathan?
All the way up, 175 feet. Imagine this all covered with ice.
Oh my God.
Yeah. from where we're standing here, that entire mid-deck there would have been a bathtub of water, with waves crashing right over that entire deck right there and washing away anybody who happened to be in it.
The ships at South Street are a monument to the toughness and ingenuity that made New York City the busiest cargo port in the world by 1912.
American ships under sail were carrying more tonnage than the almighty British Empire. And at that sea trade, New Yorkers just excelled. They beat everybody. There's no other word for it.
Floating next to the Peking is the museum's other tall ship, the Wavertree. More than any other ship still afloat in New York, she's the symbol of how the city led the world in commerce.
Wavertree is exactly the type of ship that you would have seen at South Street on any day of the week. And she has a great story to tell, a story of people working at sea, of delivering vital goods, a story of globalization, really.
Wavertree sailed around the world several times in her life as an ocean wanderer. But you have to go deep inside the ship to see one of the truly hidden secrets of New York.
The hold in Wavertree, the cargo space in Wavertree, is one of my favorite places in all of New York City. It is a magical space. It's a cavernous space. It's 200 odd feet long. It is a space in which you can look into the past. I mean, you're looking at iron frames and iron plates that were wrought and riveted together in shipyard in 1885. Those rivets are still there. You can look at them, you can touch them. The ship wouldn't exist if it weren't for that she carries stuff, and that hold is where it happens.
No matter how many sailors were lost at sea, nothing mattered until the cargo from this hold arrived safe and dry, on its way to the counting houses on Schermerhorn Row.
The first floor might be used for shop or for showroom. Upper floors would be used for warehouses, but there was always the floor, generally the second floor, that was the counting of numbers and the tracking of inventory, and that's what gave them the name Counting House.
As the seaport changed, the counting houses became groceries and small businesses, restaurants and saloons, which is why if you go to number 4 Fulton Street, the last building at South Street Seaport Museum, you can discover another secret, the remains of Sweets Restaurant and Hotel from the 1860s.
Sweets ran that hotel in one form or another until just about World War I. And after that, they concentrated only on their restaurant business. And what they did was basically locked away the hotel floors. And so what we were left with is a time capsule.
When the museum unsealed Sweets Hotel, there were the original rooms from 1866, tiny windowless spaces with patches of Victorian wallpaper, where passengers from clipper ships got their first impression of Manhattan.
When you look at those remains, you're probably looking at the oldest remains of any hotel in New York City.
As old as these hotel rooms are, at the time they were on the cutting edge of seaport design. South Street was landfill, fashioned into brand new dock space for the city's merchant ships. The old waterfront was along Pearl Street, a cluster of wharves and taverns, crowded with a very different kind of sailor.
You have to imagine a place that's very much smaller than we now think of New York City. There are only a few hundred houses in town. A high percentage of them are taverns.
Merchants catered to pirates here. The taverns, the brothels, there were pirates in New York City. They did drink a lot. Oh my God. The quantities of booze and rum that we have from official records are just staggering.
In 1690, the waterfront taverns of Manhattan were some of the best-known pirate havens in the world. Why? It was all about money.
Pirates have always been welcome in New York because they bring in cash. Not to romanticize them, you know, they were crooks. They were thieves and brigands and murderers. There's nothing romantic about pirates at all.
But to many sailors, tall tales of winning gold were enough to risk the hangman's noose and turn outlaw. Occasionally, these stories were true.
One story of one New York pirate, a guy named Gerard Van Horn, who won 1,300 pieces of 8 on one roll of the dice. You could probably buy 2 Manhattan homes with that. It was one roll of dice, and it was so amazing that it appears in several letters from several different people about this roll of the dice.
Into the teeming colonial outpost of Manhattan sailed a sea captain from Scotland named William Kidd. He'd helped the British win battles in the Caribbean, so he was welcomed at high society parties, where he met and married a beautiful young widow. They moved into a big home on Pearl Street.
They had one of the most amazing houses in the city. It was a double wide, it was deep, and they also owned other properties. And Kidd lived actually right about here, which was the water's edge. I mean, 3 blocks, you see traffic and pavement and sidewalk. This was the harbor, and Kidd could look out the window and see his ship, basically.
It sounds like Captain Kidd was living the good life.
He was. He had it all. He had the wealthy wife. He had the incredible house. He had it all, but he was a restless soul, and he really wanted to become either a captain in the Royal Navy or else a privateer. So he got a ship called the Adventure Galley, and he came back here and he needed to get a crew. And it was really hard to find a crew to hunt pirates in a place that's full of pirates. I mean, it was a recipe for disaster.
Becoming a privateer meant that Kidd was authorized by the King of England to capture pirates and enemy ships. But the English lords who financed the ship wanted most of the profits, so Kidd could only offer his crew 1/4 of the prize money. It wasn't good enough.
New York pirates are used to getting 100% of the treasure, and they just scoffed at him. They didn't want 25%, so Kidd very quietly flipped the deal on its head. I'll give the crew 75%, and he didn't tell the lords that he had switched it.
A share in this.
And that's how he got a crew. He got 100 New York pirates to sail with him.
Almost nothing is left of the New York City that Captain Kidd knew in 1690. But there's a secret in one of Manhattan's oldest churches that tells us something surprising about the man we think of as a bloodthirsty pirate. The Trinity Church archives go all the way back to the days when Captain Kidd was making his mark in New York City.
So what are we looking at? These are the minutes from when the church was first being built in 1696. It's difficult to see, but if you look here, you can see Captain Kidd's name. And he's mentioned because he lent a runner and a tackle.
Why would the church have needed a runner and tackle?
They needed to hoist up the stones for building the steeple.
So was Captain Kidd a part of the church?
Well, yes, he bought a pew at the church.
Was he active?
He never attended.
The real secret to Captain Kidd's time in Manhattan is up a flight of spiral stairs. It's the Trinity Vestry Room, a place reserved for the church board of directors. Here, along with the names of wealthy merchants and attorneys, are the original pew holders of Trinity Church, including Captain William Kidd of the Adventure Galley. Kidd never attended church because he'd already set sail in his Adventure Galley to hunt for pirates. Problem was, his crew was made up of pirates from the taverns of New York City.
His crew eventually mutinied on him. He lost 100 men, and his backers turned on him because they thought he was stealing from them. He gets labeled a pirate, and he winds up hanged in London, May 23rd, 1701.
Captain Kidd never returned to his home on Pearl Street, and as Manhattan's waterfront transformed into a wealthy seaport, ship owners faced a new kind of outlaw, river pirates.
River pirates were gangs, many of them Irish gangs out of the Five Points, and they made a practice of just robbing stuff that happened to, float by them. It was one of the costs of doing business in the port.
River pirates, harbor pirates, river thieves. It became an enormous police problem.
River pirates were operating in the seaport because by the 1860s, its glory days as a shipping center were slipping. The story of the Rose House on Water Street says it all. It's the third oldest building in the city, the home of Captain Joseph Rose in the 1770s.
The water was lapping up, like literally at his back door. He could sail to his house. And he lived there for about 20 years. And then he moved to what was promising to be a more elevated kind of social neighborhood. And the building began a kind of odyssey of changing from hand to hand.
And eventually, by the middle years of the 19th century, it had become Kit Burns' rat pit.
People would bet on a terrier who would be put into the pit to see how quickly the terrier could kill 100 rats.
This building.
Today, landscape designer Todd Heyman is head of the condo association that took over the Rose House.
Was Kit Burns' rat pit in the basement?
No, it was actually in my living room.
Paint me a picture of what it must have looked like in 1860.
Well, there are illustrations, and it was a very, very dirty place. In fact, you see here that you have this square enclosure, and it was made out of wood. It was lined with zinc. It was about 3 feet high. And inside, you even see these people, and the people they're worse than the dogs. And there was also another character, Dick the Rat. If you paid him a dime, he would eat the head off of a mouse. If you paid him a quarter, he would bite the head off a rat.
How many people could he fit into the rat pit?
Supposedly, from what I read, anywhere from 100 to 300 people could fit in this space, which I can't understand because it's only 1,400 square feet. You had sailors here, you had prostitutes here, you had crime figures here.
The Fourth Ward there, just adjacent to the South Street District, was considered the worst neighborhood probably in the world.
By the 1860s, Water Street had become a continuous stretch of cheap rooming houses, bars, and brothels. It was worth your life to walk here.
The newspapers loved it. It's a dull day up on Park Road. Sure to be a fight, a riot, or a murder on Water Street.
Here at the corner of Water Street and Dover stands the oldest continuously running tavern in New York City. Today's Bridge Cafe was serving beer as a grocery store in George Washington's day. But when Kit Burns' Rat Pit was operating just 2 doors away, River Pirates were just some of the customers who made this one of the worst dives in the city.
18 different articles describing police actions in or around the building, and there were 2 murders there also.
For better or worse, wicked things have happened at this bar.
For owner Adam Weprin, the Bridge Cafe is his second home. He was still a teenager when he had his first experience here, with a piece of the bar's history that hadn't moved on.
It's Monday night. We closed up, staff goes home, locking everything up, and lo and behold, right above us coming across, footsteps. Eerie, scary, strange. Then it turned commonplace, where I could be talking to you in the middle of service and hear footsteps, and I would point upstairs and go, "Spirits?"
And what would the person you're talking to say?
Some people would be freaked. Some people would be fascinating. Yes, we ran upstairs sometimes to look. Nothing there.
The footsteps always walked the same path, half a dozen paces from something wearing heavy boots, moving south to north. Trouble was, Adam knew the room right above his bar was empty.
I've been at my desk and I can almost see out of the corner of my eye sometimes an image, something, a feeling, a presence.
A ghost.
I never say what it is. I'll just say it's a presence.
Didn't you ever get scared working here alone and hearing and feeling these things?
Several times. You look out of the corner of your eyes, you see this small crack in the door, and you feel as if you saw something go by. I would even lock the door. I admit to doing that, and as goofy as that is, if you think ghosts locking a door, what do they care about a medical lock there?
But what if you locked the ghost in with you?
We're gonna get friendly. Hopefully we're gonna get friendly.
Ghost stories started circulating about the Bridge Cafe after the Civil War, when it was a violent saloon and brothel. That's why Adam gave permission for EPIC, the Eastern Paranormal Investigation Center, to see what they could find.
They looked for ghosts, or actually, when they picked up a voice, I said, "Oh my gosh, what's that mean?" And they said, "Well, paranormal, not of the norm."
We joined the EPIC team setting up for their 3rd visit here. It takes a lot of equipment to measure for ghosts.
EMF detectors, radiation meters, temperature.
Any type of fluctuations in the environment that do not belong in this location. I'm speaking to the entity in the room right now. I believe your name was Norma. You were killed here, I believe. We started in the brothel in the 3rd floor. We took a thermographic meter, which is like a thermometer, and we pointed it at a solid object. Let's see what we got here.
It's moving right now.
Every time we would ask, could you bring the temperature down a certain degree, it would bring it down. And now it went a full 22 degrees. I'm speaking to the entity in this room. Can you bring it to 70? A full 8-point drop, 70 degrees, Norma?
She brought it down 8 degrees.
8 degrees.
8 degrees.
Oh, Norma, you are wonderful.
So you took a thermometer, you asked just in a voice
To whoever the entity was there.
to lower the temperature, and it dropped 20 degrees to wherever you pointed it. That's very freaky.
Okay, Norma. Now, can you bring the temperature back up for me? There's no way if an ambient temperature of the room is going to be steady, an object is going to get colder. Well, nice, very nice cold spot. Stagnant, it's like static electricity.
One theory is that when a disembodied spirit reveals itself, it drains energy, lowering the temperature. That's also why batteries in haunted houses can suddenly go dead. It kept happening to my own cell phone every time I was in the cafe.
Is the interference from this spirit enough where it interferes with phones, with music, with people, with service?
It's funny that you say that. Our phones here have been checked constantly.
My phone turned off twice here, and it never turns off, and it was fully charged.
Every one of my wait staff can tell you about the phones. We've all had it happen.
One of the Epic team members is Jasmine, a psychic medium.
Oh, so I'm already feeling the oppression here, like it's already this. Do you feel it?
We were going to the same area of the cafe the team was focusing on, the third floor where the brothel had been in the 1860s. Where Epic was picking up temperature changes, Jasmine said she was seeing and feeling the young women who had worked here.
The girls, they're in hell, like this is their life. The men are brutal. It's alcohol and violence and brutality. She's screaming and they're running in, and one of them's stabbing him to death.
How do you, Jasmine, as a medium, see this and function and deal with it? Listening to you, I can barely stand the thought of all these things.
Because I'm not often in a brothel with this brutality, so this is just this is pretty bad.
This is one of the worst experiences coming here.
Yeah.
It's so dark, I can barely tell how many rooms, but it seems like there are about 3 or 4.
I think so. 1, 2, that horrible little place in there. I see all beds there, so the girls, they were working next to each other. It was like a factory.
Is this place, Jasmine, from everything that you feel and see, is it haunted still? Like all this unrest and all of this horrific stuff that you're seeing?
Yes. Well, first of all, the energy of all that happened is in the walls. It's just here. It's like a film going all the time.
Is it confusing?
Yeah, it is. It's like seeing a really quick cut movie. So it's bang, bang, bang. It's like just horror, horror, horror. So I see the kind of great female energy and then the brutal, brutal masculine energy, and it really stinks in here back then. It's a horrible smell. But they're free. They're not stuck here. They just want to say, this is what happened. They're forgotten. There's no books about them.
But in fact, through the 1855 census of New York City, we can trace 6 women listed as prostitutes to 279 Water Street. Women like Mary Smith, age 20, Catherine Student, age 37, Amy Campbell, age 25. Are they the voices who spoke to Jasmine? We don't know, but the unusual energy fields Epic measured that night seem to back up her findings.
I don't know why we're getting 4 milligauss on a chair. Does that mean that there's something here that may have been an anomaly? Absolutely. It should still be 3 bars here. It's not.
Does what Jasmine sensed tonight go along with what you've been detecting and recording with all of your equipment and machines?
In the areas that we've been hitting on, she's been pretty on the ball, strangely enough.
The Bridge Cafe continues life as a popular downtown restaurant with ghosts and customers alike sharing the oldest wooden buildings still left in the neighborhood.
It's got such a rich history. After 218 years, I think it has a lot more years ahead of it.
South Street Seaport has reinvented itself as a glittering tourist destination. But amid the shops and restaurants, the cobblestone streets still lead down to the water, where 200 years ago, a seafaring town turned into an international city.
It's where cultures meshed. It's where the ship would come in with a new cargo, with goods that hadn't been seen before, with people who'd never been to this place before, the melting pot that became the United States.
The great merchant captains who built New York City wouldn't recognize the seaport today if they came ashore, unless, of course, they happened to pass by the antiques in the museum's collection.
The very idea of the South Street Seaport Museum is the marriage of the land and the sea. The water is actually the fabric that connects us rather than the gap that divides us. And it's really that marriage that made New York, New York.
Captains, pirates, or ghosts, everyone was drawn to the seafaring town where they hoped to prosper, the city that became New York. All of their secrets are still here. All you have to do is look for them.
Although today is not so bad, but with all